If I was Superman, then cute pixel indie games would be my kryptonite. So when I saw Little Witch in the Woods on Steam, I knew I had to play it. You play as Ellie, a young witch apprentice with a sentient hat that loves to berate you. As you play, you'll meet a bunch of characters, forage for items and ingredients, make potions, and help to restore the village. And while I had a few issues with it, I genuinely really enjoyed the game. Most of its problems do realistically just come from the fact that it's in early access, and I'm sure they'll be fixed upon full release. So before I start gushing about what I loved, and believe me, there is a lot that I loved, I want to actually list off a few things that I didn't like so much. Some of the smaller ones were that some of the text kind of gets hard to read. There were some typos and some sentences which were structured really weirdly, and unless I'm losing my mind, I swear some characters were referring to themselves or who they were talking to in third person. Rather than saying me, I, or you, they would refer to each other in their full names. This is likely just because it's from a small indie dev from Korea, and it only really happens occasionally, so it doesn't detract too much from the game or the story. Some things could definitely be streamlined. When you buy a potion recipe, you don't just get it added to your encyclopedia. You have it added into your inventory, where you then have to interact with it for it to then go into your book. I actually thought my game had bugged at first because I couldn't find the recipe, so I felt like this was a bit strange and out of place. The backpack could honestly be bigger because a core part of this game is collecting resources as you wander around the forest. So it's a bit counterintuitive when you have such a limited amount of storage on your person at once. One issue that did irk me a bit though was the broom. It feels almost pointless if I'm being honest. For some reason it has a durability bar which has to be refilled by adding either sticks or mud to it. And the problem is that you're spending more time collecting these resources and going back to your cabin to repair it than you actually save by using the broom. On top of that, mud and sticks are both resources that become quite valuable later on in the game, and if you've been using most of them to fuel your broom, you'll end up spending each day collecting the finite amount of these resources that are available daily. That being said, it handles like a dream. Once you get used to it, you'll feel like Lightning McQueen drifting around the forest, so maybe it's worth it. Ka-chow? Something that really needs to be fixed is this weird glitch that I had near the start of the game, where periodically my hat would keep spamming me with the same message telling me to go back to the cabin, which is exactly where I was going anyway. To call this annoying would be an understatement, and honestly it kind of put me in a bad mindset for the rest of the game. But I kept reminding myself that this is an early access title at the end of the day, glitches are inevitable. But holy shit, please let this be the first thing that gets fixed. My last problem with the game was the crazy number of controls that it has. When you start, you have 4 arrow keys to move and spacebar to run. Okay, cool, pretty standard and simple controls. But as you progress, you're constantly being given new mechanics which each have their own buttons until eventually you don't just have 4 arrow keys and a spacebar, but you also have Q and W for action select, Z to interact, X to go back, D for your encyclopedia, N to open notes, S for your backpack, E and R for potion select, A to activate potion mode, Z to aim a potion, C to throw a potion, Control for broom, spacebar for boost, Shift for sneak, Escape for pause. It's a lot to remember, especially for a low intensity, relaxing game. So maybe some of this could get streamlined somehow, or at least made easier to remember by labeling things, like it does while using potions. God, the word potions doesn't even sound real anymore. Anyway, that's essentially all of my negative points out of the way now, so I can finally talk about all the things I loved, and believe me, there were a lot of things I loved about the game. The art is absolutely amazing. The pixelated style has the best of both worlds, where it's got this really cute indie look to it, but it also doesn't suffer from oversimplification. In fact, the world feels really detailed, and I absolutely love exploring the different areas. As you play, you'll keep noticing lots of really nice details which just flesh out this magical world. There are no areas that feel boring or barren, and my only wish would be to maybe even add a couple more cool details, just because they're so fun to spot. On top of all this, the daytime in this game feels completely different to nighttime. You can be playing during the day and have these big frog guys, flower birds, bunnies which are literally called squishy chubs, and the whole game has this happy, safe feeling to it. But then it gets to nighttime and the world is transformed into this beautiful magical forest. Lit up with blue flowers and glowing butterflies, it's hard to remember that this and this are the same game. The character portraits are fantastically detailed and filled with personality. From the art alone, we have a sense of how Ellie is speaking and acting. I can't really ask for much more from the visuals of this game. The sound is also really well done. None of the sound effects are annoying or of poor quality, and the music is really nicely done too. My only issue would be that I personally didn't really like hearing the village background song. Even when good things were happening and the village was being restored, the music felt really sad, and it was fairly loud and intense. But everything in the cabin sounded great, from going to sleep to using the machines to the really fun sound that the cauldron makes when you make a potion. Everything was just a joy to interact with. The general way you control the game actually surprised me. As a huge fan of the platformer Celeste, controls and movement have been something I can always appreciate, and one of the first things I noticed was how precise and crisp it felt to move around. Even on the broom, it felt genuinely really fun flying around and doing drifts. Initially, the game did feel a little slow, and since sometimes you have to wait until the next day, it felt like I was mainly spending my time picking up different resources and not having a lot to do. But as things progress, you start getting bigger quests to complete and more goals to achieve, with some side quests too. The second half of this game definitely feels a lot stronger than the first for quests and tasks, but it's also important to remember that this is just one chapter of, I believe, 3 or 4. We know that it's not the end of the story by far. In fact, it's just beginning. I would absolutely love for the rest of the game to be littered with quests and activities to fill up those days where you don't have much to do. Maybe some scavenger hunt quests, or some lore expanding missions, or even some new characters or objects to interact with. The actual story of the game is obviously just starting up. Other than helping the city and venturing into the woods to destroy vines, it's only near the end of the chapter that we start seeing what may or may not become some kind of antagonist, which gets me really excited for the full release. Going into the game, I did look up what the average playtime was, and apparently it was around 5 hours, which I struggled to believe because I felt like I was doing everything pretty efficiently, especially in the second half of the game, and it still took me over 7 hours to get to the ending, and that's only the first chapter, so it's safe to assume we're probably getting maybe at least 15 to 20 hours worth of content in the full release. Little Witch in the Woods isn't without its flaws. Weird mechanics, a lot of buttons, and some glitches are this game's rough edges, but everything else plays out exactly how an RPG about a witch making potions and exploring the forest should play. Everything from the sounds to the characters to the absolutely beautiful scenery and art style makes this game a joy to play. It's often rare for a game's world to truly feel special or magical, Stardew being the obvious example here, but Little Witch does this pretty well in my eyes, and with a few more special moments added in and some more world building moments or cutscenes in the full release, I'm sure that this game will be remembered as one of the best indie witch games ever made.